Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to take a look at how to implement login with Reddit. So to implement login with Reddit, we have to use the OAuth2 protocol. The OAuth 2.0 protocol is an authorization protocol which is supported by many authorization providers like Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit as well. So using the OAuth 2.0 protocol, we can actually authorize an application to do actions on behalf of the logged in user. So today we'll take a look at how we can implement that for Reddit. So before we take a look at how the authorization flow works, I just wanted to talk about an article that I wrote on the same subject. So if you are more of a reader, then you can take a look at this article. This article goes in deep on how to implement the login with Reddit feature. I'll leave a link to this article in the video description. So if you want, you can take a look as well. So before we take a look at the code, I just wanted to go over Reddit's OAuth2 flow. The OAuth2 flow allows our web application to take actions on behalf of the user. So the user first visits our web app. So the web app here is basically both the front end and the back end. So the user visits the web app, that is the front end part of the web app. He then clicks on the login with Reddit button, and then the web app redirects the user or the browser to Reddit. Then if the user is logged into Reddit in his browser, he'll be redirected to a permission screen. If he's not, then he'll be asked to log in into his Reddit account and then redirected to the permission screen. Then depending upon the user's action, that is whether he allows or denies access to the permissions requested by the web app, Reddit will redirect back the browser to the web app with some information. And this information is very critical in understanding whether the user allowed access to the web app or it denied access. So we'll take a look at how does that happen. Then the web app uses the information passed in the previous step and then makes a request for access tokens to the Reddit API. Then the Reddit API verifies whether the request is correct and then returns back with the user's access token and some more information which we'll take a look at. And then the web app can then just return a JWT if that's the way the web app authorizes and authenticates a user. So this is the overall flow of how the whole OAuth 2 system works for Reddit. So before we take a look at the code, there is one very important step that we need to do, and that is we have to create an application. There is a button called create another app. So you can click create app. Make sure that you read the API usage guidelines. So this talks about how many requests you can do to the Reddit API for a particular user and stuff like that. So you can put in a name here, whatever you want. So this will appear when the user is redirected to Reddit for allowing or denying access to your web app to their Reddit account. Then over here, you need to select web app because that's what we are building. You can add a optional description here. You can have an about URL, and the most important thing here is the redirect URI. So if we go back to the flow here, as you can see, the user is redirected to the redirect URI. So this is basically a URL on which your app lives. So you need to put that in here. So for development, it could be something like http localhost 3000 / some path like login/callback or login/Reddit or something like that, right? And then you can hit create app. And once that is done, you will get two things which are super important. This is your client ID and this is your client secret. So these two things are very crucial for your application to work. So make sure that you copy and paste these. The secret, you can only see this once. You cannot again go back and recreate or view the secret. So make sure you copy this. Now let's first quickly take a look at the front end and then we'll move on to the back end. So this is a very simple React app. So this is my app.js. So here I'm using a browser router and which is exported from React Router DOM. And I have two routes. One is the root route, which then renders the home component. And there is a login callback route which renders login with Reddit component. So all the magic happens in the home component. So let's open the home component, and the home component, what I have is a button here, this right here, which says login with Reddit. And once you click on the button, it calls a function called open login, which then opens a window in itself, and we redirect the user to Reddit to get permission for our web app to make requests on the user's behalf to Reddit API. Now, if you take a look at this URL, this is very important URL. So we make a request to API v1 authorize. We pass in the client ID. So the first argument that we pass is the client ID. So this is a GET request, and the client ID is what you got when you created the Reddit app. You have a response type as a next argument, which is set to code. Now this you cannot change as per Reddit's documentation. There is a state which I've set to a string. So the state is very important in understanding whether you got back a response to your authorization request from Reddit that you started. Whatever text you pass in here, Reddit is going to pass it back to you just to make sure that you are the one who started it. Then you have the redirect URI, which should be equal to the value that was set when the app was created in the Reddit console. So for me, it is set to HTTP localhost 3000 login/callback. And then there is another argument, duration, which can be take two values, permanent as well as temporary. So when I set it to permanent, Reddit API will return me another token along with an access token called a refresh token, which can be used to get an access token when my current access token expires. We'll probably get to that in the later part. And then there is a very important argument, which is scope. So the string here basically is the permissions that your web app needs. So if you actually curl this, you can get a list of all the scopes that you can add, and these have descriptions as well. I'll also have this link in the video description. Once that's done, you actually have a full URL with which you can now redirect the user to Reddit to get the permission for your app to work. Under UI, this is going to look something like this. So I'm actually working on a scheduler for Reddit. And when I click on login with Reddit, it's going to redirect me to this URL here, right? So let's take a look at what happens. So I've already logged into Reddit in my personal account. So when I click login with Reddit, it's going to take me to this URL and it's going to ask me for these permissions, right? This is my application name that is scheduled for Reddit. And then it says save and unsave comments and submissions, submit links, access to Reddit username. Now the user of your web app has two options. He can actually allow and decline access. So your application should be able to handle both of these cases. Today we're just going to take a look at what happens after user allows access, but your application should also gracefully handle the decline path as well. So let me allow permission, and then I go to this thing here, and this now basically means that Reddit is done with its processing. It found everything good. The state that I passed in the URL here is returned back to me by Reddit, so that I can verify that it is the request that I started. And then you have this code here, which is probably going to be blurred, but this is very important in the later step that we'll take a look in the backend. Now let's quickly take a look at the backend setup. So here I have a Express server on top of Node.js. So there are some things which are not relevant to the tutorial, like connecting to database and signing JWT. So you can have your own implementations here. The most important thing is this GET request. So let's go back to the diagram to understand what is happening here. So here the web app is basically two things, the front end and the back end. So the Reddit API, after the user says allow, is redirected to our web app's front end, and then the front end makes a request to our back end, right? So if we kind of take a look, so if we go back to the front end code quickly, and if we actually open the login code, so as you can see in the use effect hook here, I'm actually making a GET request to our API, which runs at 3003 port called login with Reddit. And along with that, I'm passing in the code that I'm getting in the redirect URI. I first redirect the user to the front end. The front end then makes a request to the back end along with the code that it got from Reddit. Let's go back to the backend code. So here, the login with Reddit endpoint gets the code which is returned by the Reddit API. So the code that I'm referring to is this code right here. I first take the code and then I make a request to HTTP Reddit API v1 access token. So now we need to get the access token for the signed in user, because the user has now allowed us the permission, us meaning the web app, the permission to do all of those things that we mentioned in the scope on the user's behalf, right? So now the web app has the permission to do this for actually making requests to the Reddit API, we need to get access tokens, and that's why we need to make a request to API v1 access tokens, right? So this is the post method. The grant type is authorization code. The code is what we received from Reddit via the redirect URI, and again you have to pass in the redirect URI here. I don't know why do we need to do that, but this is a requirement by Reddit, so we have to do that. And here the most important thing is the authorization header, which takes in a encoded header, which is basically a string concatenation of the Reddit client ID and the Reddit client secret. So if you remember, these two things we got when we created the Reddit app. So we have to encode these headers via base64. So we first encode these and then we have to send them on the authorization header. So this is basic HTTP authorization, and the content type has to be set to application x www form URL encoded. You have to have this application type. If you don't, then Reddit is not going to accept. And then once you get a response to this request, you can parse the body, and then in the body you have access to the access token, right? Also in the body you can also have access to refresh token, which I have shown here. And now what you need to do is you need to actually save the access token as well as the refresh token in your database. So whenever you have to call the Reddit API for a particular user, that is on behalf of the particular user, you need to use the access token. And in my understanding, the access token is valid for a certain period of time. So it is, I think it's only valid for an hour. So after an hour, if you try to make a request using the same access token for the user, a Reddit API is going to reject that access token, right? Now to get a fresh access token, you need to make a request to another endpoint of user where you need to pass in the refresh token, and using the refresh token, the Reddit API is going to return you back a fresh access token, I think along with a new refresh token. So you need to store those two again, right? So make sure you store the access token and the refresh token for a particular user. They are very important in your database. And once you have stored those, you can actually now make requests. You can make requests to the Reddit OAuth endpoint. Also remember, all the requests which are made to the protected route are made to OAuth.reddit.com and not to www.reddit.com. All the public ones which do not require any authentication are made to www.reddit.com. All that require authentication are made to OAuth.reddit.com, right? And then you have to pass in the authorization header in the bearer schema, which basically means you write in bearer followed by the access token, and then in the response you get whatever you have requested, right? So here I've requested basic access to the profile, and then depending upon your application, you can just return a token. So here I'm using JWT for authentication and authorization. So here I'm returning a JWT back to the client. So now let's quickly take a look at the demo, and I'll try to explain what is happening. So just for the record, I'm using MongoDB database. So this is my application right here. So this is my React app. So I click on login with Reddit. This goes to Reddit. I then click on allow. Then it sends me back to my application with a particular code. So on every request, even for the same user, the code is going to be different. So if you make a request to the same code again, Reddit will say this is a stale code and won't allow you to get access tokens. So here, if you take a look at this right here, this is the token that is being returned from my backend, and this is the JWT. And if you take a look at my database, which is my MongoDB database, if I refresh this here, I have a user here, right? So just to give you a quick recap, to authenticate a user using the Reddit API OAuth2 Flow, the user first visits the web app, clicks on login with Reddit. Then the web app redirects the user to the Reddit homepage where the user can deny or allow permissions requested in the scope. Then if the user clicks on allow, the Reddit redirects back web app on the redirect URI field that was filled when creating the app in Reddit console. Then the code which is sent back to the web app from Reddit along in the redirect URI is then used to get the access token for the particular user, and then Reddit checks whether the access token is correct and then returns back access token along with the refresh token if the duration is set to permanent, and then the web app can now make requests to the Reddit API on behalf of the user using the access token, and if the access token expires, can use the refresh token to get a fresh access token. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I hope you liked the video. If you want a more in-depth video on this and stuff like that, do let me know in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.